For the Passion Project, I knew that I wanted to start by researching Panama, but I wasn't sure which aspect of the country I was most interested in. I decided to have a conversation with Mr. Morrison, as I knew that my topic would relate to history. He suggested that I look into Panama's independence from Colombia, America's effect on the country through the construction of the canal, or something more personal to me, the influence of Christian missionaries on religion in the country. I made the decision to look into Christianity first in order to see if there would be enough research available. The first step that I took in my research was looking back on some information that I had read over the summer to see if it could relate to my main topic of interest. It came from the Atlas of Global Christianity and included a lot of the basic information pertaining to my topic. I deemed this source as credible due to the fact that it is a published atlas and includes detailed information. This source noted that in the Panamanian Constitution, after they declared independence from Colombia, it granted religious freedom to the people, allowing Protestant missionaries to work and be effective in this country. The most helpful thing in this source was a table detailing the percentage of Panama citizens that identified as Protestant and all other religions based on the census of 1900, 1970, 1975, 1980, and 2000. Using information from the census also increases the credibility of this source. These numbers showed me that there was growth within the Protestant Church each year. The atlas went on to explain some of the religious events in Panama throughout this time frame in order to explain the growth or decline of each religion. This information was a good start, but nothing was too detailed, so I decided to do a more specific search in order to determine the events behind the increase of Protestantism in Panama. By searching for the history of religion in Panama, I found a website that has a page titled Timeline of Religion, and it included information on Panama. When scrolling through, I found that in 1950, a group called the Nazarenes entered the society. However, this was the only reference to Panama found on the website. This source was made by the Seoul National University, giving it credibility. However, the information on it was not essential to my topic. It did show me that missionary groups other than Christians were active in the country, and that in order to find the information that I need, I will have to do more specific searches. At this point, I was wondering if the information about my topic would be out there, but I continued research anyways. The next source that I found was the most beneficial towards my research. I found a thesis paper by A. Ravensbergen titled Protestantism in Panama. At first, I was questioning whether or not this thesis could be considered credible, as it is written by a student. However, upon looking into it further, there was intense research done, and the author spent time in the Protestant missionary field in Panama. All other sources that I referenced in my research validated the information that Ravensbergen had spoken. There may be a bias presented in the thesis, as the author is a Protestant Christian. This source served as my guideline for the majority of my research. I would read through the paper, taking notes, and when a piece of information sparked my interest, I would go to additional sources in order to learn more. The thesis detailed the history of the Protestant Church in Panama, the arrival of new churches, advantages of the Protestant Church, and historical events that influence religion. One of the things that drew my attention was the separation of church and state through the president at the time. This separation made the link between people and the Catholic Church much weaker. When I looked further into this, I found a book titled Culture and Customs of Panama by Soli. This book reaffirms the fact that there was a separation of church and state, but adds that it was not necessarily a clear separation, more of a natural knowledge that the two functioned separately. It was helpful in adding that the separation was built on the people's decisions and allows them to decide whether or not the bonds between themselves and the Catholic Church would weaken. By the people having this control and making the decision to drift away from the Catholic Church, it allows individuals to be more receptive to Protestant missionaries. This source is credible due to the nature of the publisher and the depth of the information that is referenced. After this source, I went back to the thesis and continued reading. I discovered that the Protestant Episcopal Church was the first Protestant church to be formally organized in Panama. This church developed several mission statements in the Canal Zone and in Bocas del Toro, initially serving West Indians and Americans, and later focusing on the Spanish-speaking community. I found it interesting that the Spanish-speaking community was not the primary focus, so I scrolled through the thesis and found additional information on the canal. It explained that through the construction of the canal, many American denominations entered Panama in order to serve the Americans who were working on the canal. It wasn't until construction was ending and Americans returned home that the churches shifted their focus to the Panamanian citizens. To further authenticate this thesis paper, I found the Panama Canal record, sourcing each of the people or organizations, including churches, that entered the canal zone. This source is credible as it is a government record. It did not give me much new information, but was helpful in validating a majority of my previous research. I then continued following the thesis paper. The next piece of information that interested me was in 1960 when the New Tribes Mission arrived in Panama. They had a unique approach to their work in that they planted many congregations in their communities and then let local leaders evangelize to their own people. Their strategy is that a rapid spreading of the gospel is best done when there is the least amount of outside effort to control and limit. Basically, the NTM knows that the Catholic faith has always been very costly and hard to transport, while evangelical churches in Panama can go anywhere, so they use this to their advantage and spread out. This church interested me, so I decided to do more research on them. The first thing that came up on a normal Google search for the New Tribes Mission in Panama was a news article titled "New Tribes Missionaries Kidnapped in 1993 Declared Dead." This immediately drew my attention, so I began reading the article and found that 3 men were working for the organization in 1993, building a church for the Cuna Indians near the border of Panama and Colombia, when they were taken from their homes at gunpoint and smuggled into Colombia, where they were shot and killed 3 years later. This story proves that there were pushbacks and people against the work of these Protestant Christian missionaries, and that they were not fully effective in their work. I questioned the credibility of this source, as it is both a .com and a Christian-based organization. However, there are statements from the family included in the news article, and other news stations, including Fox News and New York Times, covered the same story with the same information. Due to the nature of the event, a Christian organization would have ties to this event and cover it well, once again increasing the credibility of the source. I continued in the thesis paper and found a point where Ravensbergen began listing additional churches that entered Panama throughout the years of 1940 to 1960. All of these organizations were small Protestant churches that never reached over 500 members. This organization was cited in the paper, so I went to the bibliography and found a page run by the Latin American Socio-Religious Studies program of Costa Rica. Here they have compiled records of when American denominations enter Latin America. This source once again validated the information within the thesis paper and added to my list of missional Protestant churches within the country. As I was reading the thesis, I realized that the author was alluding to a lot of different cities or geographical areas. While I have heard of or even been to many of them, I didn't necessarily know where they fell on the map, so I found Panama on the Britannica Encyclopedia and was able to look at the map over time and see information about what kinds of people, indigenous, native, modern, etc., live in each part of the country. This knowledge allowed me to grasp a better understanding of why mission organizations chose the various locations that they worked in, and I gained a general understanding of the layout of the country. Britannica Encyclopedia is a 250-year-old encyclopedia, so the information found in this source can be considered credible. Next, I looked back at my research and noticed that while I had a lot of information, it just explained what had happened in the country. I was lacking information and understanding on what kind of effect the work had. I did a Google search to determine what kind of influence the Protestant Church had in Panama. I found a book titled Operation World by Jason Mandrick that analyzes the 2000 censuses of many different countries. The author states that in 2000, 88% of Panama was Christian, with only 8.2% being Protestant. This proves that there was not extensive success of the Protestants in growing the church. However, in the year 1900, only 7% of the population was Protestant, so there was substantial growth occurring. It also states that within the country, only 4.3% of the population has changed denominations over time. Of this 4.3%, over 60% have converted to Protestantism, illustrating that there has been the most conversion done by Protestant missionaries and churches. This source is credible as its evidence is the census, and it was published by a reputable organization for Christian books. My final source came when I was questioning what made Mandrick's statistic true. Why was the Protestant church more effective than other religious groups in conversion? I came across another book. This one is called Religious Politics in Latin America, and it was published by Notre Dame, giving it credibility. The author, B.H. Smith, discusses that many people who shift to attending an evangelical church come from a middle-class background. The middle-class audience in Panama likes Protestant churches because they often have a neutral location, punctuality of both the service and the congregation, a lack of Christian jargon, absence of tithing pressure, and they use media sources. This final source gave me more understanding to the reasons that Protestant missionaries were able to have the success that they did while in Panama. Through my research, I was able to determine that there was enough evidence at hand to continue my extended essay with my original topic idea and the question, to what extent did Protestant missionaries influence religion in the Republic of Panama?